My name is Kemi, and I come from a small town called Ilupeju, situated in the heart of Nigeria. Ilupeju was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where neighbors were more like family, and where traditions ran deep. Life was simple, peaceful even, until a shocking truth shattered the illusion we all lived under. Growing up, Auntie Rose was a household name in Ilupeju. She was the woman everyone admired, the one people pointed out to their children as a role model. Elegant, confident, and always impeccably dressed, she owned several successful businesses, including a popular restaurant, a fashion boutique, and a small guest house that attracted visitors from all over the region. But what truly set Auntie Rose apart was her generosity. She was known for her philanthropic deeds, donating generously to the local church, funding the renovation of the community school, and organizing free medical outreaches for the less privileged. During festive seasons, her house was open to all, and no one left without a gift or a hearty meal. To many, she was a savior, a beacon of hope in times of need. I remember the day she paid for my school fees when my father fell ill, and my family couldn't afford it. I was on the verge of dropping out when she stepped in without any prompting. She called me to her office, handed me an envelope, and said with a warm smile, "Education is the key to your future, Kemi. Don't let anything take that away from you." Her kindness brought tears to my mother's eyes, and from that day, I, like many others, held her in the highest regard. But as they say, not everything that glitters is gold. It all started subtly, with whispers and fleeting glances. There were rumors that young girls working in Auntie Rose's establishments often left town abruptly. Some said they moved to the city for better opportunities, others believed they got married and settled elsewhere. In a community like ours, where gossip was the order of the day, such stories didn't hold much weight. After all, people came and went, it was part of life. However, things took a strange turn when my childhood friend, Ada, vanished without a trace. Ada was a bright and cheerful girl, full of dreams and ambition. She had recently started working at Auntie Rose's boutique, hoping to save enough money to attend university. We used to meet every evening by the riverbank to chat about our day, our dreams, and everything in between. One evening, she didn't show up. I thought maybe she was busy or tired from work, but when days turned into weeks without any sign of her, worry settled in. Her parents were frantic. They went to the police, filed a missing persons report, and searched everywhere, but there was no trace of her. Auntie Rose expressed deep concern, offering support and resources to aid in the search. She organized prayer sessions, printed flyers, and even offered a reward for any information leading to Ada's whereabouts. Her involvement comforted many, assuring them that everything possible was being done to find Ada. But Ada wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, 3 more girls disappeared, all employees of Auntie Rose's businesses, all around the same age as Ada. The pattern was too glaring to ignore. Families were devastated, and fear began to creep into our once peaceful town. Parents became cautious, forbidding their daughters from working or staying out late. The community was on edge, but still, no one dared to point fingers at Auntie Rose. How could they? She was the town's guardian angel. One afternoon, while helping my mother at our small provisions shop, a stranger walked in. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a hesitant demeanor. She introduced herself as Mama Esther and asked to speak with me privately. Curious and slightly apprehensive, I agreed. We sat outside under the shade of a mango tree, and she began to tell me a story that sent chills down my spine. My daughter, Esther, worked at the guest house owned by Auntie Rose, she began, her voice quivering. She disappeared 6 months ago. The police did nothing, and everyone tells me to move on, but I can't. She's my only child. I listened intently as she continued. Before she disappeared, Esther confided in me about some strange happenings at the guest house. She mentioned that some girls were taken to a special assignment and never returned. She was scared but didn't know what to do. Tears welled up in her eyes as she added, "I tried to speak out, but no one believed me. They all think Auntie Rose is a saint. But I know she's involved. I can feel it." I was stunned. Could it be true? Could Auntie Rose, the woman who had done so much good, be involved in something so sinister? Part of me wanted to dismiss Mama Esther's claims as the ramblings of a grieving mother, but another part couldn't ignore the growing number of disappearances connected to Auntie Rose's businesses. I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to Rita, another friend who had previously worked at Auntie Rose's restaurant. She was reluctant to talk at first, but after some persuasion, she agreed to meet me secretly. We met at a secluded spot by the river, away from prying eyes and curious ears. Rita looked nervous, constantly glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out at any moment. "Kemi, I don't want any trouble," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "You know how powerful she is." "I understand," I replied gently. "But people are disappearing, Rita. Ada is missing, and so are others. We need to know what's happening." She took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting fear and sadness. "When I worked at the restaurant, I noticed that some of the girls were offered better opportunities. They were told they'd make more money and have a better life. But after they left, no one ever heard from them again." "Did you ever get such an offer?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, but something didn't feel right, so I refused. After that, things became difficult for me at work. I was assigned the worst shifts, treated poorly, until I eventually quit." "Did you tell anyone about this?" "Who would believe me?" she asked, her eyes pleading. "Auntie Rose has connections everywhere. Even the police are on her side." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. If what she was saying was true, then we were dealing with something much bigger than a few missing persons. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to speak with more people, especially those who had worked closely with Auntie Rose. Most were too scared to talk, while others dismissed my inquiries with nervous laughter and quick excuses. It was as if a veil of fear and silence covered the entire town. Then I met Roland, a young man who used to work as a security guard at the guest house. He had left town shortly after quitting his job but had recently returned to visit his sick mother. I caught up with him at the local market, and after some coaxing, he agreed to talk. We met at a quiet spot behind the old church. Roland looked weary, his eyes darting around nervously. "I don't want any trouble, Kemi," he began, echoing Rita's sentiments. "I understand," I assured him. "But people are missing, and their families deserve answers." He hesitated before speaking. "During my time at the guest house, I noticed some strange activities. Late at night, expensive cars would arrive, and young girls would be taken away. We were told not to ask questions, just to do our jobs." "Did you ever see these girls again?" I asked. He shook his head. "Never. And if anyone got too curious, they were fired or threatened. I left because I couldn't stand it anymore." "Why didn't you report this?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Report to whom?" "The police. They are all in on it. Money changes hands, and mouths stay shut." His words painted a bleak picture, but they also confirmed what I had been suspecting. Auntie Rose was involved in something dark and evil, and she had the power and connections to keep it hidden. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act, but I couldn't do it alone. I approached my uncle, Charles, who was a journalist for a regional newspaper. He was known for his investigative pieces and had a reputation for exposing corruption. If anyone could help, it was him. I visited him at his office in the nearby city. As I narrated everything I had learned, his face grew more serious by the minute. "This is big, Kemi," he said thoughtfully. "But it's also dangerous. You're dealing with powerful people who won't hesitate to silence anyone threatening their operations." "I know, Uncle," I replied firmly. "But these girls deserve justice. Their families deserve to know what happened to them." He nodded, his eyes reflecting both concern and determination. "All right. We'll do this, but we have to be smart about it." We devised a plan to gather concrete evidence that could expose Auntie Rose and her accomplices. Uncle Charles reached out to some trusted contacts in law enforcement and human rights organizations who could provide support and protection. Our first step was to infiltrate one of Auntie Rose's establishments to gather first-hand evidence. We needed someone on the inside, someone who could document the illegal activities without arousing suspicion. Enter my cousin, Amoka, a brave and resourceful young woman who was studying criminology at university. When we told her about the situation, she didn't hesitate to volunteer. "I can apply for a job at the guest house," she suggested. "With the holiday season coming up, they are likely to be hiring extra staff." Though worried about her safety, we agreed, ensuring she was equipped with discreet recording devices and had backup plans in place. Amoka applied and was quickly hired as a housekeeping staff at the guest house. Over the next few weeks, she observed and recorded several suspicious activities: late-night arrivals of young girls, secret meetings in secluded parts of the property, and interactions with shady individuals. One night, she witnessed something that solidified our suspicions. A group of girls, all looking frightened and confused, were herded into vans and driven away under the cover of darkness. Amoka managed to follow them discreetly and discovered they were taken to an isolated compound on the outskirts of town, heavily guarded and concealed from public view. She reported back to us, providing recordings and detailed accounts of everything she had seen. The compound, she learned, was where the true horrors unfolded: a baby factory where young girls were held captive, forced into pregnancy, and their babies sold to the highest bidders. The revelation was both shocking and heartbreaking. The true horror of what Auntie Rose had been doing for years was now clear. She was running a baby factory under the guise of her successful businesses and philanthropic deeds. The girls she lured with promises of better opportunities were trapped in a nightmare, forced to bear children who were then sold off, likely to wealthy families or worse, into trafficking rings. We knew we had to act fast. Uncle Charles worked tirelessly to compile the evidence into a comprehensive report, while his contacts in law enforcement prepared for a coordinated raid on the compound and Auntie Rose's other establishments. The goal was to rescue the girls, arrest those involved, and finally bring Auntie Rose's evil empire crashing down. The night of the raid was tense. I stayed with my mother, who was unaware of the full extent of what was happening but sensed that something was very wrong. Uncle Charles was in constant communication with the police, ensuring everything went according to plan. The raid was swift and efficient. The police stormed the compound and rescued dozens of girls, some of whom were in the late stages of pregnancy, while others were barely more than children themselves. Auntie Rose's loyal staff were arrested, and the authorities seized documents and financial records that linked her directly to the baby factory. But the most dramatic moment came when they finally apprehended Auntie Rose herself. She was found at her luxurious home, completely unaware of the storm that was about to descend on her. The police arrived in force, surrounding her property and cutting off any chance of escape. I watched the news from our small living room as the footage played out. Auntie Rose, still dressed in her elegant attire, was led away in handcuffs. The calm, benevolent mask she had worn for so long was gone, replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. The woman who had once been hailed as a saint was now exposed as a monster. In the days that followed, Elupoju was in uproar. The news of Auntie Rose's arrest and the horrifying truth of her baby factory spread like wildfire. People were shocked, angry, and heartbroken. Families of the missing girls were devastated by the revelation, yet also relieved to finally know what had happened to their loved ones. The girls who had been rescued were taken into care by social services, receiving medical attention and counseling to help them recover from their traumatic experiences. Some were eventually reunited with their families, while others, who had no one to return to, were placed in safe homes where they could start to rebuild their lives. As for Auntie Rose, she faced the full weight of the law. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she was charged with multiple counts of human trafficking, child exploitation, and other heinous crimes. Her trial was a national spectacle, with people from all over the country following every development. In the end, she was sentenced to life in prison, her once glamorous life reduced to nothing. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was anger at how Auntie Rose had deceived us all, sadness for the girls whose lives had been shattered, but also a sense of justice being served. The community of Elupoju would never be the same, but we had learned an important lesson about not being blinded by appearances and the importance of always questioning what lies beneath the surface. And though the scars would remain, there was also hope. Hope that those who had suffered could heal, and hope that our town would grow stronger, more vigilant, and more compassionate in the aftermath of this dark chapter. As for me, I continued with my studies, determined to make something of myself in honor of those who hadn't been as fortunate. And every time I passed by the ruins of Auntie Rose's guest house, I was reminded that evil often hides in plain sight, behind the most beautiful masks.